Yeah, so here we are. Team preview is beginning. Good luck to both of our trainers. We have Sam running Tapu Fini, Kartana, Gigalith, Metagross, Vikavolt, and Arcanine versus Caleb's team of Tapu Fini, Araquanid, Porygon 2, Marowak, Kartana, and Crocodile. So again, that Vikavolt making an appearance here in Dallas.
Yeah, the Vikavolt has been really popular, and I think it's sort of a group of players who have built it together. I do really like it on Sam's team. A little bit different before we've seen it paired up with that Garchomp, but not an option on Sam's team, so it'll be interesting to see how he implements it with the other 5 on his team. I love that both these players as well have a Tapu Fini. After the mockery it received at the beginning of the season as the worst Tapu Pokemon, I think it's clear that that's actually just not true. Caleb using it to great effect in his match that we saw on stream yesterday, and we are going to see a Tapu Fini in the lead from both sides of the field.
Tapu Fini and Marowak taking the field on Caleb's side. Tapu Fini and Arcanine on Sam's side. So both these trainers having the idea of bringing the Tapu Fini, bringing the Fire-type Pokemon. But unfortunately for Caleb, that Arcanine brings the Intimidate with it. And right off the bat, that Marowak is at a weakened state.
Yeah, Marowak is known for its really big damage. Of course, it relies on the Thick Club item to do it, but if it's not able to do the big damage it needs, it's actually quite susceptible to being knocked out. A couple of things can happen here from Sam's side to nullify it. Tapu Fini, of course, with a nice Water-type attack, likely Muddy Water, would be able to catch it and do some big damage. Even if it doesn't do enough, Arcanine's often carrying Snarl, which would be doing super effective damage, not used in this case to lower the special attack, but to get the knockout. The main concern here for Sam is, does he have an answer to Caleb's Tapu Fini?
We see Arcanine switch out, Kartana coming in its place, so depending on what Caleb does this turn, that could be a huge risk. Fortunately for Sam, that Marowak uses Protect the Tapu Fini on Sam's side of the field, targeting both Pokemon on Caleb's side with a Muddy Water, so not going to deal any damage to Marowak, hardly any damage to the Tapu Fini on Caleb's side of the field, and it uses this opportunity to set up the first of what I can only assume of several Calm Minds.
I think these are going to be two very different Tapu Finis. We see Sam's just locking into an attacking move, going to get some damage down early. But we see the complete opposite from Caleb. His Tapu Fini a lot more defensive. Setting up that Carmine's going to be really good. It wasn't getting much damage done from the Tapu Fini, but it does still have to be a little bit scared of this Kartana. We saw how much Tapu Fini could do, and the pressure it puts down on the Marowak with the Muddy Water means it can't stay around to knock out the Kartana.
Marowak switching out on Caleb's side of the field, the Kartana coming in its place. Interestingly enough, Sam targeting that slot with a Leaf Blade from his own Kartana. We see a second Muddy Water from Sam's Tapu Fini, targeting down both these Pokemon, not dealing a lot of damage, but we start seeing the accuracy drops on both of Caleb's Pokemon, so both the Tapu Fini and the Kartana, but Caleb not fazed by accuracy quite yet, uses this opportunity to set up a substitute.
If you're not attacking, you don't need to be worried about accuracy. That's really nice for Caleb. He has got a lot of setup, and he's still got over half the health on his Tapu Fini. Interesting enough, we see Sam go for another Muddy Water, not switching it up to something that could damage the Tapu Fini on Caleb's side. It was kind of obvious, I think, that Marowak was going to be leaving, and we are going to see that Tapu Fini realizing it's not much use right now and switching right out to get Arcanine in.
Arcanine coming out on the field, intimidating the Kartana on Caleb's side of the field. Kartana on Sam's side, using Sacred Sword against the Kartana on Caleb's side, knocking it out. So we will not see any attacks from Caleb's Kartana at all this game, unfortunately. Kartana on Sam's side getting a Beast Boost thanks to that knockout. We see a Moonblast from the Tapu Fini on Caleb's side of the field, target down that Kartana and deal about half of its health worth of damage.
Yeah, even with the not very effective attack, it's just decent damage to get down on the Kartana. We see it makes knockouts a little more viable. A smart switch by Sam, of course, doesn't want to get caught by anything, so he brings in Arcanine, who also resists Fairy-type attacks, does get the Intimidate down on the Kartana as well, so even if it had the chance to move, it wouldn't do much. I think even though that Sam just looks a little more defensive, I think he's in a really good position here, and getting the Kartana to knock out the opposing Kartana is definitely something he needs. That's a good answer on Caleb's side of the field to the Kartana that's going to threaten the Tapu Fini when Substitute is gone, and it's also going to threaten the Crocodile, so the Beast Boost getting cancelled out by the Intimidate, Kartana definitely still a threat.
Definitely. We have to keep in mind that Caleb might not have anything to help knock out that Tapu Fini in the back of Sam's party as well, so losing that Kartana so early on is really going to prevent Caleb from being able to deal with it later on in that game if that becomes a situation that he has to deal with. Certainly using more Calm Minds on his Tapu Fini will help, but it might not be enough. We see Crocodile take a Leaf Blade. It is a critical hit, and it knocks it out. So Caleb is down to just his last 2 Pokemon. We see a second Beast Boost from that Kartana, restoring it to that +1 attack state, and Snarl, a sound-based move, breaking through the substitute and removing the special attack boost on that Tapu Fini. We see it use its own Muddy Water to target both this Arcanine and that Kartana. However, thanks to the Snarl, it's not going to deal a lot of damage to either Pokemon. We do see an accuracy drop, though, on the Kartana on Sam's side of the field.
That's definitely something Caleb needs to get back in the game. Of course, it would be better if he didn't get snarled, but the snarl coming out from Marowak, removing the bonus damage essentially he'd get from the Carmine boost, and it's going to do some damage behind the substitute, so that's what he needs to do. He does need to start focusing on how to get rid of that substitute, but he's definitely playing a game where he doesn't seem at all worried about the Tapu Fini, and I like that. He knows what Marowak can and can't do. He knows that sometimes Marowak's going to have to protect, so it'll be interesting to see if he can capitalize on this. Kartana showing an interesting choice, though, in the Night Slash.
Night Slash into the protecting Marowak. We see Arcanine used a second Snarl to target that Tapu Fini behind the substitute once again, lowering its special attack once again. But Tapu Fini is able to use Muddy Water to deal, it's not going to be a lot of damage, but if we see some accuracy drops here, that could be huge moving forward in this game. We see it deal a significant chunk to Arcanine and get that accuracy drop and activate Arcanine's held item, which is the Citrus Berry.
It's actually going to be one of the bigger berries, the Aguave Berry, which heals more than the Citrus Berry but activates at a lower point. So Arcanine getting back a lot of health. Was looking like it was slowly getting worn down by these Muddy Waters. Heals back a ton with the berry, and now it's going to be even harder for Tapu Fini. Every turn before it attacks, it gets its attack, or special attack rather, lowered by the Snarl. This turn is going to be really hard. I think Sam probably has this locked up with the combination of Snarl, Kartana being able to Night Slash the Marowak as well, something not everyone carries on it. It isn't going to do quite enough damage to get the knockout, though.
Yeah, but we see that combination of Snarl and Night Slash onto the Marowak easily knock it out. It is just Tapu Fini, and even though the substitute is still in play, Sam has all 4 of his Pokemon, and Tapu Fini just won't be able to deal enough damage thanks to those Snarls. I believe it's at -2 attack right now. As you can see, it hardly did any damage to the Arcanine. It hardly did any damage to that Kartana, and while we do see continued accuracy drops, I don't think that's really enough for Caleb to get that offensive momentum he needs. He can sort of keep disrupting things, maybe stall out this game a little bit longer if that's part of his strategy, but I think it's time for him to start thinking about game 2.
It definitely is. He put a lot of eggs in the Tapu Fini basket, unfortunately. And even though in some of the games we saw on stream yesterday, that was actually what won him those games. But unfortunately, Sam just seems to have an answer to everything else on his team. The Snarl actually working as well behind the substitute. Very interesting to see that move, and that interaction just something Sam is aware of. Tapu Fini still trying to fight back, though, going down valiantly.
Definitely. We see it use a Muddy Water after it lost its substitute to that Leaf Blade from the Kartana, taking yet another Snarl from that Arcanine in the process. You know, we keep seeing these accuracy drops appear on the field, but I don't think any Pokemon has actually missed an attack yet, which is unfortunate for Caleb, but on the other hand, I'm not sure it's going to make much of a difference at this point.
No, we do see the Leaf Blade miss. It is going to keep lowering the special attack though with that. Tapu Fini just trying to buy time, interestingly enough, goes to the substitute, which lowers its health all the way down to the area where it can activate its Aguave Berry of its own and get the substitute up. So a very interesting play. Caleb buying a lot of time though, even though he's up against it. So maybe looking for something we haven't seen or talked about this weekend in that overall round timer.
It's certainly an interesting play, but looking at these teams on paper, I mean, this is a 4 versus 1 match right now with the Tapu Fini versus all 4 of Sam's Pokemon. Unless he starts getting critical hits, I don't think we're going to be seeing any knockouts quite yet. But if this match were to go to time, he certainly would be at a disadvantage unless he's able to bring it down to a one-on-one situation. But that Muddy Water, I believe it only did 3 hit points worth of damage on Kartana, who even though it resists that water type attack, it's still not that strong. But I guess we're starting to see the accuracy come into play.
Yeah, we are seeing the accuracy come into play. The same turn again, we are going to see the Arcanine connect with the Snarl. The special attack is just at bare minimum now. Tapu Fini still fighting back with the Muddy Water. This is a very slow way out, but it is some sort of a win condition for Caleb in his eyes. That's why he's playing it. Kartana unable to hit Leaf Blades. If he can just connect with one, he's going to be able to round out and win this game. Unfortunately, connecting with that one Leaf Blade seems to be a little bit of a problem. Maybe Caleb looking to get another Pokemon in and see what it's got.
What's interesting is Sam could just switch out any of his Pokemon at this point in time and sort of reset all of these accuracy drops, but instead we finally see that Leaf Blade connect, we see that Tapu Fini get knocked out, and that is the end of game 1 here. So Sam taking that win. Not really sure how Caleb's going to adjust moving forward. It seems like he's putting a lot of his money in the timer basket.
Yeah, that was one interesting thing. We've not seen it so often. Definitely not in this format, particularly compared to previous formats. But Caleb really focusing on his Tapu Fini, really believes in his Tapu Fini as we've seen him in previous rounds. But unfortunately, Sam just seemed to have the answer to it, and he maybe knows already from a Swiss round or some information he's gathered about how Tapu Fini is being played that he wants to set up Calm Minds. He likes to set up substitutes, but you can snarl behind the substitute and nullify the special attack boost at least from the Calm Mind. So it's only the special defense it benefits from, and then with Kartana, it doesn't even care about special defense.
It really doesn't. So I think if Caleb, looking at this game, he had a decent idea for game 1, but he needs to switch up his strategy for game 2. And wow, these guys just jump right into it. You know, I think both of them selected their teams pretty much immediately upon team preview, so not taking a lot of thought. It's possible that by Caleb stalling out the match a little bit, maybe he used that time to think of his strategy. Maybe honestly he was stalling for time to try and think of a strategy. You know, that is a benefit to having that option and having, you know, such a bulky Pokemon left as your last Pokemon. We do see Caleb lead with the Araquanid and the Kartana combo. And we see Kartana and Arcanine come out on the field on Sam's side.
I like the change up from Caleb here a lot. Changing the water type that he brings to this game is definitely something he needs to do. We saw the Tapu Fini not do enough, and now he's got the Araquanid in. We've seen Araquanid over the course of this weekend is able to do a lot of damage if it can be kept safe. So if the threats can be removed by the Kartana on Caleb's side of the field, or at least forced to switch or protect, then if he can catch something like the Arcanine, for example, with a big liquidation, it's going to be taking easy knockouts. Caleb, though, not wishing to keep that Kartana in as the big threat.
We see Marowak switch in for the place of Kartana. Kartana using Leaf Blade to target that Marowak, so a great switch by Caleb there. Sam possibly predicting a protect on the Arcanine. Marowak taking a flamethrower as well. If Caleb targets that Arcanine with a liquidation, which it does, this is going to be huge. It's dealing a ton of damage, but Arcanine holding on, getting the defense drop, and activating its berry.
Yeah, that berry going to be doing a lot of healing. We see why people have been playing Arcanine. The Intimidate was probably the thing that saved him there. It would have been very, very close without it, but that actually puts it in perfect range to activate the Aguave Berry. A good switch by Caleb though at the beginning of the turn. Sam, I think, trying to predict something coming in for the Kartana there, so he does decide to go for a double target in there, and the combination of Flamethrower and Leaf Blade, neither of them super effective at all on the Marowak, so Caleb re-evaluating his position a little bit. I don't think it's going to be so easy for Marowak though. Kartana's still able to do something, and Arcanine won't be doing anything to it this turn.
We see Arcanine retreat and Tapu Fini take its place on Sam's side of the field, bringing with it the return of the Misty terrain. So no status effects will be taking effect quite yet. We see the Marowak switch out as well, Crocodile coming out on the field. It's going to intimidate that Kartana, which might be very helpful for that Araquanid, depending on who it decided to target this turn. Night Slash, though, into the Crocodile, so a great read by Caleb there. Again, using his switches amazingly to just absorb damage and stall for time. But Sam doing that as well, sending in his Tapu Fini to take the liquidation, but unfortunately for him, that Tapu Fini also will take a defense drop along with it.
Both players making a very smart switch. Neither player actually going for like a predict on what was going to come in, so neither player actually able to capitalize on that. The defensive switch is really paying off. A little bit worse for Sam. He does, of course, get caught with that defense drop from liquidation.
Crocodile surviving the Leaf Blade from Kartana, and we do see the Groundium Z from Caleb, Who is it going to target? If it targets that Tapu Fini, if it targets that Kartana and gets a knockout, that could be huge for Caleb's momentum moving forwards.
It could be, and I think with the defense drop there, the tempting option is this Tapu Fini. It's going to be driven down by this Crocodile, and removing a threat like that, definitely from Sam's side, is something Caleb needs to do. He knows how much it can do, and it takes the knockout, so the combination of the liquidation damage, the defense drop, it really helps with Araquanid now free to set up a substitute.
That was a great play there by that Araquanid. You know, a very brave play by Caleb. You know, making a guess that the Kartana would target down that Crocodile instead of the Araquanid. And now the Araquanid doesn't need to worry about the Kartana. It has a little bit of breathing room. It could even possibly target that Arcanine as well. It all depends on who Caleb identifies as the biggest threat on the field right now.
No, I like the Intimidate actually paying off for Caleb this time. We saw it paying off for Sam earlier. And Crocodile with the Intimidate manages to take that Leaf Blade with a plum and then retaliate and take a knockout on that Tapu Fini. So very smart play. I do love the brave play from Caleb though, the substitute setting up. He seems to really like that, and getting breathing room in such an offensive format is really good, I think. So Araquanid now free to throw out some liquidations. It's going to be able to get good damage down on both Kartana, and Arcanine in particular is under pressure. Caleb as well with the Pokemon lead.
Definitely. So Caleb needs to take a moment and really think about who the biggest threat for him is right now on Sam's team. You know, this is still a close game. The momentum could swing in either trainer's favor, even though Caleb currently has a one Pokemon advantage. We see Crocodile protecting this turn. Kartana using the Night Slash to target that Crocodile. Arcanine with the Flamethrower going to target that Araquanid. However, due to its Water Bubble ability, I'm not sure it's going to be enough to break the substitute, and it's not. Unfortunately, Araquanid using this opportunity to fire back a liquidation into the Arcanine for that knockout.
Very smart play there from Sam. Caleb. I think Sam actually getting in his own head a little bit, thinking that Marowak's going to come back in. He's seen that switch from Caleb before, so he throws a Night Slash towards the protecting Crocodile. Smart play from Caleb there to protect the Crocodile. If he wasn't sure what Sam's thought pattern was, that protect buys him turn to see what was going on, and now he just gets to take the knockout as well, while Araquanid was completely safe. So Sam actually forced down to his last two here. Caleb, with all four of his remaining, got a lot more breathing room, especially with the substitute up on the field, and the ability to switch, which Sam does not. So it looks like Caleb is going to be driving us forward into a game 3 here.
Yeah, if all goes well, that should happen. However, Sam might still have some ways out of this game. You know, it all comes down to whether or not Caleb is able to protect that Araquanid, possibly preserve that substitute, and just let Liquidation do its thing. We see Crocodile finally switch out that Marowak coming in its place. Kartana targeting the Marowak with a Leaf Blade. So Caleb again making an amazing read. Lunge from that Araquanid, targeting the Kartana, not going to deal a lot of damage, but it should drop its attack by one stage, which is essentially an Intimidate that Caleb can use whenever he wants. We do see a Rock Slide from that Gigalith target both the Marowak and the Araquanid. Unfortunately, it'll both break Araquanid's substitute and knock out that Marowak, but if Crocodile wants to now, it can come in with essentially a free switch and get another Intimidate off, bringing that Kartana down to, I believe, -2 attack, also weakening that Gigalith as well in the process.
Right at the beginning of the turn, we see Sam with his Kartana make another mistake, actually, and it's something we don't usually see at this point, but he's been trying to guess the predict from Caleb. He's trying to predict what's going to be making the switches, so he throws the Leaf Blade in there, thinking that maybe Crocodile is going to stay. Doesn't account for the Marowak coming in, which is what he actually guessed the turn before. So Caleb playing the mind games very, very well here, I think, having a slight edge over Sam in this game. Going into game 3, that's going to be really important, and I like that he brings in his own Kartana here. It puts down a lot of pressure on both Pokemon on Sam's side of the field.
Gigalith protecting Kartana on Sam's side of the field, targeting the Kartana on Caleb's side of the field with a Sacred Sword. Leaf Blade into the protecting Gigalith, and unfortunately that Araquanid targeting the Gigalith as well. So a great protect by Sam there.
Very good protect by Sam. Unfortunately, he doesn't manage to get everything he needs with his Kartana again. Sam's Kartana has just not been able to do enough this game. I do like that Caleb realizes the Gigalith is the threat, especially with the Araquanid on the field, and he's not so worried about the Kartana. He does, of course, have it lowered attack by lunge. He does have Intimidate in the back when he comes in, so if he can remove Gigalith and leave Kartana on his own, he should be in good shape, and getting rid of it just like that with a Leaf Blade.
Leaf Blade from Kartana on Caleb's side of the field, knocking out that Gigalith, activating its Beast Boost in the process, raising its attack. Kartana on Sam's side of the field going for a second Sacred Sword into the Kartana on Caleb's side of the field. We see that Araquanid use Liquidation, doesn't deal a lot of damage to Kartana, but at this point, that defense drop is huge, and unfortunately Sam is at a significant disadvantage. I think you're right. I think it's almost time for a Game 3.
It is. Our last top 8 match is going to be going to a Game 3. Love the adaptation from Caleb here. The Tapu Fini just didn't pay off for him at all in Game 1. So he switches up the water type, a pretty easy switch to make, nearly like for like. And Araquanid's done so much. We see how little damage it's actually taken over the course of the battle, and we are going to see Kartana on Caleb's side of the field just go for a Sacred Sword on Sam's Kartana, definitely showing, I think, better use of the Kartana, one of the Pokemon they do have in common, from Caleb.
Definitely. The fact that Sam allowed his Kartana to take so many Intimidates to get that attack drop from the lunge just really hindered it. And even though it wasn't getting knocked out, it wasn't dealing damage either. And Caleb did a great job of aggressively targeting down its partner once he realized that Kartana A wasn't going to switch out, and B just didn't have that damage potential anymore on his team. That's something that Sam's definitely going to have to keep in mind going into this Game 3. If he lets his Kartana get weakened again, he just won't have the damage potential he needs to win this game. He really needs to think about how he can possibly maybe stop some of those Intimidates, maybe stop the Araquanid, or just otherwise have a contingency plan. And it looks like we're already going into Game 3, so these trainers are just really on the ball, knowing how they want to start these games off.
Yeah, they definitely seen what wins for them, and I think Caleb learning from Game 1, we saw him adapt in Game 2. Sam seemed pretty comfortable with what he did in Game 1, but didn't quite have the answer, so if he's decided to make changes, they've got to be in retaliation to what happened in Game 2 for sure. He does start off with some pretty similar leads to Game 1, I believe.
Araquanid and Crocodile coming out on the field on Caleb's side versus the Arcanine and Tapu Fini. So lots of Intimidates flying around, but it looks like Caleb might have the advantage going into this game, but at the same time, we don't know much about that Tapu Fini quite yet.
No, we haven't seen much coming out of Sam's Tapu Fini. It's definitely a more aggressive style than Caleb's. Caleb's looking to Carbine and substitute, and all we've actually seen out of Sam's is those attacking moves, so likely it's one of those items that boosts attack, something that really allows it to do a lot of damage, and I like that. I think that's a good adaptation, but he needs to show a little more from it. He needs it to do the amount of damage that it really kind of warrants. It's not going to be able to do too much to this Araquanid, especially with the water bubble up, but I think the Crocodile is under a little bit of danger, so it has to be smart.
We see that Sam has decided to bring the Vikavolt with him into Game 3 of this match, switching it out for his Arcanine. Crocodile on Caleb's side of the field using Protect. Tapu Fini on Sam's side of the field using that Muddy Water that we saw from Game 1. It's going to not connect with that Crocodile, but it will connect with the Araquanid, not dealing a lot of damage. We do not see an accuracy drop, and Araquanid using this opportunity to set up that substitute that caused Sam so much trouble the last game.
Yeah, very smart play actually from Caleb. I'm a really big fan of how he played that turn. Scouting out what was going on with the Crocodile, not locking him for that Z move Tectonic Rage, so he doesn't end up using it on something that's switching. He could have targeted the Arcanine, and a smart switch by Sam, of course. You get in, you avoid any damage from ground type moves, and you manage to put pressure on the Araquanid, but he didn't have much coming out of his Tapu Fini to stop Araquanid setting up a substitute. He needed a little more pressure, I think, on that side of the field to really stop that going up, and I'll be curious to see if he has an answer to it in his pairing on the field right now.
Kartana coming in on the field in Crocodile's place. We see Araquanid dodge the Muddy Water, so Kartana, the only Pokemon on Caleb's side who will take damage. Unfortunately, it also takes an accuracy drop. We see Vikavolt go for a Bug Buzz into the Kartana, which is enough to knock it out, possibly thanks to a critical hit. So unfortunately for Caleb, he has just lost one of the Pokemon that allowed him to deal so much damage in the past game. We see the Liquidation from that Araquanid connect with the Vikavolt, but it doesn't deal a lot of damage. We do see that defense drop.
Yeah, very nice from Sam there. figuring out something he needs to change, and we see the usage of Vikavolt here. It does manage to put pressure on both the Crocodile and the Kartana that Caleb's been bringing every single game, and the Bug Buzz, a pretty safe move there. It looks wild, but it put pressure on Crocodile, and of course Kartana being a grass type isn't going to enjoy those at all. It's going to be a little bit harder, I think, for Vikavolt to do as much, but Araquanid's still in absolutely great shape. Not enough at all coming out of the Tapu Fini on Sam's side. It kind of looks a little bit like dead weight, similar to the way Caleb's did in game 1, and Crocodile coming back in, of course, for Caleb, getting Intimidates down that aren't going to be that useful.
They're really not going to be that useful, and Crocodile is at a type disadvantage from both the Tapu Fini and that Vikavolt. We did see that Bug Buzz attack last turn. We do know it was targeting that Crocodile, but I guess it's something that Caleb doesn't have to worry about quite yet, that Vikavolt switching out and Caleb using this opportunity to immediately use that Z move, targeting most likely is that Tapu Fini.
It wants to get rid of it. It's not going to be going for the Vikavolt. We did see it take a knockout on Tapu Fini in earlier round, but without the defense drop from a
lunge liquidation, my bad.
From Araquanid, then it may not get the knockout. It's going to be interesting to see if it needed that or it does get it without it. It does not, unfortunately. Tapu Fini remaining on the field and avoiding. The Crocodile does avoid that muddy water, so the one thing it needs to hit with the muddy water, it's not getting it. That substitute still remaining in play though.
Yeah, Araquanid targeting the Kartana with a liquidation. If Caleb was going to dodge any of the muddy waters that Tapu Fini was throwing out, that was the one he needed to dodge. Now Crocodile has another opportunity here to target the Tapu Fini, provided the Kartana does not knock it out. We do know that Crocodile survives a -1 Leaf Blade, but that Kartana is not at an attack disadvantage quite yet. It's possible that Caleb might try and use the lunge attack on that Araquanid to get its attack, the Kartana's attack, down by 1 stage, but it's all about these mind games right now. Both these trainers have been great at switching their Pokemon around. It's going to come down to if one of them can outpredict the other, or just who makes the better play.
I think it's very obvious to keep the Crocodile safe, but if Sam can capitalize that, he's going to be in great shape. He is going to start keeping the Crocodile safe with the Protect, and Kartana throwing the Leaf Blade into that Protect, so no damage coming out. Tapu Fini been muddy watering all game, so maybe it's one of those choice items, something we don't often see on the Tapu Fini, and Caleb doesn't seem too worried about it.
He doesn't seem worried at all. The Araquanid substitute finally fades from the field, but it's allowed it to almost get all of its health back. We see the liquidation unfortunately target the Tapu Fini and not the lunge on the Kartana. Tapu Fini just barely holding on, so that Crocodile will either have to switch out or possibly try and double Protect to allow it to survive a Kartana's attack in the future. I think Caleb has to switch it out this turn.
I think he has to switch it out because of the play he made on the last turn. I really think he needed the lunge to get that attack drop. As we saw, he knows the damage calculation for the Crocodile, so lunge would have been good. Getting a little bit greedy, thinking he can get a knockout on the Tapu Fini, not realizing, even though he has one himself, just how bulky it is, and now we're going to see how much damage gets done.
Oh, unfortunately that Crocodile is knocked out by a Leaf Blade. We see Caleb keep it in, which to me almost makes me wonder if it's that Marowak in the back that he has. Tapu Fini with another Muddy Water, again going to make contact with that Araquanid. Doesn't deal a lot of damage, but an accuracy drop here could be huge. Araquanid, though, not dealing any damage, setting up a substitute instead.
Yeah, getting back to the position it likes to be. When it has the substitute up, it feels very safe. Of course, Kartana having to use its Leaf Blade into a substitute, not what he wants. He wants to be hitting the Araquanid directly with the Leaf Blade. So I think another good position from Caleb. Whatever he brings out now, in this case the Marowak, is going to have to do a lot of work for him. We've seen that Tapu Fini consistently throwing out Muddy Waters, and with a 4-2 Pokemon disadvantage, I think although Sam's been playing this very slowly and slowly whittling it down, Caleb's just not answered aggressively enough. The loss of that Crocodile took a lot of the offensive pressure out of his team, and he's just going to keep playing defensive, so really relying on Araquanid here.
Marowak protecting Kartana, not targeting the Araquanid though, so we know that the Araquanid substitute can survive 1 Muddy Water barring a critical hit, so that substitute should be around for one more turn. And we finally see it target that Kartana with a lunge to lower its attack stat. But unfortunately, I'm not sure whether or not that was the best play. He needed that a couple turns ago. With that Tapu Fini out on the field, we see it keep spamming that Muddy Water attack. I mean, it's possible that Marowak could dodge it. It's not the most accurate move in the world, but it's really Caleb taking a huge gamble, trying to play a win condition that he honestly needs a little bit of luck to get, and that's not even counting the 2 Pokemon that Sam still has in the back of his party.
No, I think Sam pulling this back, a very good start from Caleb in this game, but kind of not getting everything he needed as quickly as he needed. We are going to see the attacks start to come out. Kartana's Night Slash is going to connect to a Marowak, take it down to below 50%, and another Muddy Water from Tapu Fini.
Unfortunately, Marowak does not dodge this Muddy Water. It will knock it out, and it is just this one Arachnid versus all 4 of the Pokemon on Sam's team. It doesn't even have the luxury of that substitute that it's had up for most of the game. Arachnid's Liquidation will finally knock out that Tapu Fini, making it a 3-on-1. But with that Kartana still having access to Leaf Blade, and the Arachnid's health, I believe, will be sitting just about at 50% after you take the Leftovers recovery into account. I don't think it's going to be enough for Caleb to win this game.
No, and unfortunately I think the problem we've had in this game from Caleb's side of the field is what he's not actually done is the smart switching we saw from him in game 2. The other change, of course, Sam bringing that Vikavolt has definitely helped him out, puts a lot more pressure on the Arachnid, so it was a very responsive play. Tapu Fini in game 1 doesn't win, so he switches to Arachnid. Arachnid wins game 2, so Sam then switches to Vikavolt, and that's the kind of smart play that wins you these best of 3 scenarios. The Leaf Blade wrapping up the game and firing Sam into the top 4, so should be an exciting match. I like his team a lot. This Tapu Fini
Pokemon Andrew decides to bring with him, and whether or not Mandibuzz stands a chance. We are in team preview, and we do see that Andrew is running Porygon 2, Mudsdale, Tapu Koko, Arachnid, Salamence, and Kartana versus Nick's team of Tapu Fini, Mandibuzz, Kartana, Arcanine, Mudsdale, and Garchomp.
So a Mudsdale on both teams. We didn't see it on stream earlier. We've not actually seen it on stream all weekend. And it's something that people were very excited about at the beginning of the format. It's got that really great stamina ability, so it can really take up hits and become even bulkier as it takes those hits. Be interesting to see if either of them bring it. Interesting to see it, on Nick's team. Arachnid is going to be putting a lot of pressure down on it, so maybe not from him, but I think Andrew may have the opening to bring it. I like these teams. They're both very, very different. We've seen Nick's Mandibuzz doing a lot of work, and that is definitely something to focus on. Obviously a Tapu Koko on Andrew's side of the field that can be a pretty good answer to it, but outside of that, if the Tapu Koko is taken care of, Mandibuzz could absolutely go to town as we saw it in the earlier rounds.
Yeah, so on paper it looks like we have a Trick Room-ish team versus a Tailwind-ish team. You know, we do see some fast Pokemon on Andrew's team, that Tapu Koko, that Salamence, that Kartana, but the Arachnid, Porygon 2, and Mudsdale is actually a very solid Trick Room core for him. And if he saw Nick's match earlier, maybe got some information from what happened in day 1 of this tournament, knowing that Mandibuzz has Tailwind, we could see him elect to bring something like that into this game 1, possibly hoping to have the speed control for the duration of this match. We'll have to see what these trainers decided to bring.
Yeah, well, the Tailwind's not been so popular this year. Trick Room being a very popular, you can't set it up with the Trick Room there. Doesn't look like a very Trick Room-esque lead, though, from Andrew, leading with the faster Pokemon on his team, and Nick going for a lead I think he's quite comfortable with. Very offensive from both players. Not so much concerned about their speed control, maybe saving that for later in the game.
We see the Salamence and the Tapu Koko show up on Andrew's side of the field. Nick sending out his Kartana and his Arcanine. Both the Arcanine and the Salamence carrying that Intimidate ability, lowering the attack stat of all Pokemon on the field by 1 stage. Kartana and Arcanine might be very hurt by that, but Tapu Koko, Salamence, not usually physically offensive Pokemon, probably not as worried.
No, I think the lead really stacks up here for Andrew. He does get the Intimidate down. That's really helpful. Getting that Intimidate to be effective is important in these matches, and it gets you off to an early start. It forces decisions from Nick. Does he want to try and battle through the attack drop and get some damage down that way, or does he start to switch around? If he starts to switch around, does Andrew pick up on that and start to punish those switches? We know Salamence. We've seen a lot of different Salamence, but they often carry that Dragonium Z. If you can catch something on the switch with a big devastating Drake, that would be interesting to see. It hopefully won't be in that Tapu Fini Fini slot though.
Kartana switching out, sending the Tapu Fini in its place, removing the electric terrain, subbing in the misty terrain in its place. Salamence switches out as well. Andrew sending in his Kartana. So could be at risk from that Arcanine depending on what move Nick decided to use. Thunderbolt into the Arcanine, revealing Tapu Koko's Life Orb, and Arcanine using Snarl. Unfortunately, the Tapu Koko dodging that attack, but it still deals a nice chunk of damage to that Kartana.
The Kartana actually showing its kind of weakness there, that the special defense really isn't high at all in Kartana's situation. So that's Snarl doing way more damage. The attack drop not so important in the special attack department. They are using physical attacks. That's good damage. A big loss not to get the Snarl on the Tapu Koko, but I think the change of terrain is really going to help Nick. It wasn't in the right slot. If he had predicted the Tapu Fini coming in, that Thunderbolt would have been doing big damage. Not as much damage as if the electric terrain came up. So a bold prediction from Nick. We're going to have to see if it pays off.
All right, so that Arcanine also, it could target down that Kartana. I think we might see it use something like Flamethrower or Burn Up this turn. I don't think we're going to see it use something like a Will-O-Wisp quite yet. Instead, it's going to switch out, and there is that Mandibuzz. A very interesting switch by Nick. We did just see Tapu Fini target that slot with a Thunderbolt, but we saw Mandibuzz's item activate. It was that Misty Seed.
Yeah, that Misty Seed boosting defenses, something that's kind of hard to get together. We do see a Discharge, though, doing really negligible damage to that Mandibuzz, just showing off its bulk there.
We see a Sacred Sword from that Kartana target the Mandibuzz as well, and again, showing off its bulk. Part of that probably was thanks to the boost in defenses from that Misty Seed. However, we know that the Mandibuzz carries Roost. We know that it has Tailwind. It's such a bulky Pokemon. I think having it out on the field is really great for Nick right now, but he still has that Tapu Koko to worry about.
Yeah, the pressure is really on Andrew to remove that Mandibuzz before it sets up the Roost. That was something that won him a game in the earlier round, but if you leave this Kartana unchecked, then it's going to be doing a whole lot of damage in return. We are going to see the Kartana leave the field though, so he's relying on the Tapu Koko this turn to do all the damage it needs.
Intimidate from that Salamence taking effect on both the Kartana and the Mandibuzz, not affecting the Mandibuzz as much because it is attacking with Foul Play, but Thunderbolt into the Mandibuzz, it is enough for that knockout. Unfortunately, it just wasn't bulky enough to live all three of the attacks it took within the past turn. Sacred Sword from that Kartana targeting the Salamence, and thanks to the Intimidate and thanks to Salamence's typing, it doesn't deal any damage.
No, very good turn there for Andrew. Doesn't go for the Discharge again, obviously with the switching coming in. And we do see that Mandibuzz get removed from the field, so he established it as a threat and he got rid of it. He does now take the Pokemon advantage. That Tapu Fini coming in is obviously already on its terrain, but Tapu Koko is still definitely a threat here. We've seen Kartana with very low special defense, could be taking a lot of damage from the Tapu Koko. Even Salamence, which sometimes carry Flamethrower, is going to be putting a bunch of pressure down on the Kartana. And Kartana's only real answer, or only thing it can do here, is of course going to be maybe a smart strike into that Tapu Koko. But apart from that, I think Andrew's pair on the field have really well matched up against Nick's pair on the field. So smart positioning of his board, knowing what's available to come in, just give him a really good upper hand in this game, I think. So Nick, a little bit behind, but we've seen that from him before. There's definitely a way out for him with these Pokemon.
It's all going to come down to which moves these trainers pick for this turn. We do see the Thunderbolt from that Tapu Koko target the Tapu Fini. It's not enough to knock it out. Tapu Koko taking a little bit of Life Orb damage. Again, Kartana not using Smart Strike, instead using Leaf Blade and just barely missing the knockout on Tapu Koko. Flamethrower from that Salamence into the Kartana for the knockout. And Tapu Fini, the last Pokemon on the field, not attacking this turn, instead going for a Calm Mind.
Yeah, very brave of it to go for the Calm Mind. Obviously confident in its ability to be sticking around at the end of the turn. We do see the Tapu Koko, though, is still in a good position here. With the Calm Mind and the recovery from the leftovers, it's going to be close to see if another Thunderbolt is able to take the knockout here. But getting the knockout on that Kartana, nice and easy for the Salamence. Kartana may be predicting a switch in or just fishing for that critical hit, of course, with the Leaf Blade. Doesn't get the knockout on Tapu Koko. It is going to be in a good position to put pressure on. There is a nice new threat from Nick in the Snarl. If he can maybe buy some time for Tapu Fini to protect, get some leftovers recovery, maybe even get the knockout with the Snarl, looking at how low Tapu Koko is now, then he's going to be in a good position to start a comeback. With the damage already down on Nick's side, There's not much answer to the Salamence here, I don't think, from Nick. I think Salamence may be able to push through the back end of this game.
Unfortunately, we're not going to see Salamence move quite yet. It uses Protect this turn. Tapu Fini protecting as well. Nick, I think, afraid of the threat of a knockout from that Tapu Koko, who does target that Tapu Fini. Arcanine with the Flamethrower does target that Tapu Koko, and it should be enough for a knockout, which means Tapu Fini has a little bit more of an opportunity now to start dealing damage on Andrew's side of the field, provided that Andrew doesn't bring anything that also shuts down Tapu Fini in the back.
That's really what he needed to do. He bought himself a little bit of time. He capitalized on the fact he put damage down on the Tapu Koko earlier, and if Andrew doesn't have an answer to the Tapu Fini, it looks like he does in this Kartana with the Leaf Blade, but it's going to be tough for him. It is something he needs to get back in the game, but seeing that Kartana just puts the pressure right back on Tapu Fini. Of course, it's not completely safe. Arcanine is there. Arcanine, though, definitely weakened. I think Salamence might have an answer to it.
Yeah, Tapu Fini going for the second Protect. Unfortunately, it fails, which means that Leaf Blade should knock it out. Nick needed that second Protect to happen in order to have a chance at winning this game. Kartana using its Beast Boost ability to boost its attack one stage after that that Leaf Blade, and we see a Z move on the Salamence, which is a very interesting piece of information to reveal right now in Game 1.
I think Andrew could have played it safe and not revealed it, but he does show it is the Dragonium Z. It is going to be the Devastating Drake. It is, of course, going to be targeting down that Arcanine, the only thing left on the field. Just wants to make sure it gets knocked out, so it's going to take that easy knockout, and Andrew Novak is going to win this first game of this best of 3. The 1-0 lead, very good, and it looked like a very commanding win from him as well, so I think change is definitely needed from Nick in both the selection and the play while they're on the field.
Yeah, I mean, we only saw one game from Nick on stream this weekend, and it was a very interesting game, maybe not the matchup you'd usually see, but it almost looks like his team sort of uses that Mandibuzz as sort of the center of his team. It can set up speed control, it can roost, it can just be bulky and deal consistent damage thanks to that foul play attack. The fact that Andrew was able to knock it out in 3 hits before it could even roost to get that health back or attack, I think was just a great play by Andrew, sort of identifying Nick's Achilles heel, if you will, and sort of forcing Nick to readjust and play around his strategy, and unfortunately he wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, the difference in Tapu Pokemon, really, the deciding factor there in my opinion. We do see the Tapu Koko from Andrew. A lot of people are moving away from it recently, but it puts so much pressure on the things on Nick's team. Of course, the Mandibuzz getting caught a couple times by those Thunderbolts and getting knocked out. The Tapu Fini, of course, under pressure from it, and I just think there wasn't too many answers to it. He didn't bring either Mudsdale or Garchomp, which ground type would definitely help against that Tapu Koko. And I think that might be the change that Nick decides to make going into Game 2.
Yeah, we didn't see any form of speed control from either of these trainers as well, so I have a feeling we'll probably most likely see that Garchomp, unless Andrew tries to mix it up and go for that Trick Room mode, just hoping to catch Nick off guard. It's definitely a lot to think about, and with so much on the line, you really need to take your time and make sure you're making the best decision possible.
Well, we saw the Garchomp do a lot of work for him in his previous round against Giovanni Costa. Now, the big concern with this Garchomp is it is carrying the Choice Scarf, so seeing that Porygon 2 and that slower side of Andrew's team definitely puts a little bit of a doubt in his mind. You know, it casts that seed of doubt. He's not sure if he brings Garchomp. If he brings it in, locks it in with the Choice Scarf, obviously, and somehow the Trick Room goes up, but definitely harder for him to get set up, it's going to be a problem. That Garchomp going last, more liable to get knocked out before it's able to do damage. Of course, the Mandibuzz available to stop that Trick Room with the Taunt. Porygon 2s, forced to carry that Eviolite to make themselves useful, are able to get taunted, but the Mandibuzz been answered very well, I think, by Andrew here. What the changes we get from this match, I think we're going to decide if we get Game 2 or Game 3, of course. And I think Nick has a little bit of work to do.
Yeah, Nick indeed has a little bit of work to do. Let's see how he's going to start things off, leading with the Mudsdale and the Arcanine. So potentially no Garchomp in this match. Instead, we finally see a Mudsdale take the field. And from Andrew's side, we see the Araquanid and that Tapu Koko.
Very smart change up by Nick there. The ground type definitely needed, but another adaptation from Andrew. He now leads with the Araquanid. Predicting the ground type change from Nick, that Araquanid is going to be putting a lot of pressure on the Mudsdale. Of course, it's going to be hard to knock it out. It is exceptionally bulky horse, but if you get the stamina boosts up, you can start then coming back into the game. So I think a lot of pressure riding on this Mudsdale. It does have access to some very interesting moves, and the few Mudsdales I've seen definitely have some answers to Araquanid hidden in the pocket. If he can weather the storm and retaliate with one of those answers, I think he's going to be in great shape. The only thing really puts the pressure on as well. The Arcanine dropping the Intimidate, making that Arachnid a little more manageable as well. So I think a great lead from Nick. He just has to execute it properly, because we saw Andrew just capitalize on a couple of curious plays, I think, from Nick.
Yeah, definitely. Nick really needs to take his time here, make sure the moves that he's selecting are the best ones. We see Andrew taking a lot of time here, so interesting to see what he thought up. We do see that Arcanine switch out, the Kartana come out on the field in its place, going to be able to deal a ton of damage to both the Tapu Koko and the Araquanid Tapu Koko, protecting this turn, not going to target anything with a Thunderbolt. The liquidation from Araquanid moving before the Mudsdale, but Mudsdale holds on, taking the defense drop, which will unfortunately negate the stamina boost from that Mudsdale. But wait, it looks like we're getting a Z move!
And it's not the Z move you might expect. It's going to be the Rock-type Z move on this Mudsdale. It's going to be the big Continental Crush, so weathering the storm of the liquidation with the help of the Intimidate from Arcanine. Very smart lead, and now Mudsdale able to throw a Continental Crush. It's going to be squishing that Spider, just what we like to do in our own homes, particularly in Florida where I'm from. That Araquanid not able to take that at all, really easily retaliated, and one of the big threats to Nick's team removed from the field. So the only thing that can deal large, consistent damage to the Mudsdale removed, I think, and a really good tech choice on the Mudsdale there.
And a great lead from Nick. He knew that if the Araquanid were to show up in the front of Andrew's party, he needed that Intimidate drop on it to survive that liquidation and be able to retaliate with his Z move. So just very well played, thinking a few steps ahead, even at team preview. Now it's just up to see whether or not he's able to continue thinking ahead with that Mudsdale and Kartana on his side of the field.
It's going to be an interesting play. Obviously that Mudsdale likely not going to be able to stick around too much longer. The Stamina doing a lot of help. I think it worked really, really well there. Being able to weather that storm is good, but that tech choice, I'm still impressed by it. Getting rid of one of the biggest threats from Andrew's team. He's now down a Pokemon. He's going to be fighting back a little bit from that disadvantage. So I think a fantastic change from Nick here. And the Pokemon he has on the field definitely able to do something. The Intimidate is going to be a bit of a bother, and he's going to get that Kartana out so it's not affected by it.
Kartana switching out, Tapu Fini taking the field in its place, removing the electric terrain and setting up that misty terrain once again. Mudsdale switching out as well, so Nick taking this opportunity to play very defensively and get both of his Pokemon out and instead intimidate that Tapu Koko and Salamence combination, which I don't think will be much help based off of what we've seen, but you never know. Arcanine could have been switched in just to be able to take some of these attacks. We see a huge Thunderbolt from that Tapu Koko into the Tapu Fini, and we see Salamence follow up with a Flamethrower into the Arcanine. So unfortunately for Tapu Fini, it looks like that Thunderbolt is going to be a two-hit knockout without the help of that Calm Mind.
No, a very defensive switch there by Nick. Of course, nullifying the damage from the Salamence is really good, but that Tapu Fini being caught by a Thunderbolt on the way in is not what he wants at all. We do see the pressure the Tapu Koko puts down. Arcanine can retaliate with a Snarl, and then it will be able to limit the damage, but I think even if it gets a Snarl down on both these Pokemon, which would be fantastic, he's still got to buy a couple turns to Tapu Fini to heal up with the leftovers, and this is the way to do it.
This is the first turn with that Protect Tapu Fini, making sure it won't take any damage, but Andrew making a read, Thunderbolting the Arcanine instead, bringing it down to half health, losing some of its health, and also the Z move, also most likely targeting that Arcanine.
It's going to be a very good prediction this turn from Andrew. Knowing Tapu Fini needs to buy some time, he calls that Protect, throws the Thunderbolt in towards that Arcanine, getting down a good amount of damage, and this follow-up from Devastating Drake means Arcanine is going to be removed from the field. No possibility of Snarl as a follow-up, so Arcanine just not being able to pull enough of its weight, and it does manage to cling on. I cannot believe it.
Holding on with 7 HP, activating its Mango Berry, but Tapu Koko dodging the Snarl. Unfortunately for Nick, he was so close to weakening that Tapu Koko. He still gets the Snarl onto the Salamence, which will help, knowing that he has the Kartana in the back, but that Tapu Fini still is in a very dangerous position right now.
That is incredible training, I think, on the part of the Arcanine. Being trained exceptionally bulky in the special defense means it can hold on through that Devastating Drake. I don't even think Nick was expecting it to deal with that. It looked like a clean knockout, but the damage from Tapu Koko obviously not bringing it into the right range. Very, very good turn for Nick. Does miss out, unfortunately, on the snarl on Tapu Koko, so he needs to keep buying turns for Tapu Fini.
We see Salamence switch out. In its place, the Kartana takes the field. We're most likely going to see Tapu Fini switch out as well, in the Mudsdale returning in its place. So if we see another Thunderbolt from that Tapu Koko into the Mudsdale, it will not do any damage at all. And Arcanine finally able to connect that Snarl with the Tapu Koko and deal a nice chunk of damage to that Kartana as well.
Yeah, that really good turn for Nick. Obviously that survival being absolutely crucial from the devastating Drake, and now he's able to capitalize off that. The Arcanine is still in the field. It's now getting snarls down on the Tapu Koko. Nick also making a perfect switch into the Mudsdale. Obviously Andrew focused on getting rid of that Tapu Fini, falls for the trap. It comes in the Mudsdale and it just takes the Thunderbolt with the immunity. So very good turn for Nick. Definitely swinging the momentum very quickly back in his favor. Of course, Kartana can take a knockout, but it's just got to be careful. It can't knock both of these out.
It really can't, and it's up to Andrew to identify who he's most afraid of right now on the field. That Mudsdale can deal massive amounts of damage, but that Arcanine still has that Snarl, probably has a fire-type attack to help manage that Kartana. It's all going to come down to, what that last Pokemon Andrew has is, and what he thinks Nick has in the back, and how he's going to manage that. We see the Mudsdale switch out, the Kartana coming out on the field in its place. So again, a great defensive switch there by Nick. Thunderbolt into the Arcanine this time. It brings it down into the right. It's possible for Andrew's Kartana to knock it out here. We see the Sacred Sword into the Arcanine, so it does get the knockout, and unfortunately for Nick, he's unable to do any damage that turn. He lost his Intimidator, and now that Kartana on Andrew's side of the field has that nice Beast Boost.
I think an overly defensive switch from Nick, being brutally punished. Andrew seeing through it, knowing that Mudsdale was going to leave. I don't even think he knew Mudsdale was going to leave. He was just more scared of the Arcanine. So Nick making an almost unnecessary switch to Kartana. I understand he wants it on the field to answer Andrew's Kartana, but it's going to be really difficult for him. We know it's exceptionally frail in the special defense, and Kartana really has its work cut out. It needs to put pressure on both of these at once. Mudsdale on such low health is going to be able to get knocked out by these, maybe not the Tapu Koko, depending on what it's holding. We've seen Thunderbolt and Discharge, but it could be, as we see with a lot, Dazzling Gleam is going to do well. I think the pressure is really on Kartana here to swing back the momentum in Nick's favor.
Yeah, for Andrew, it's all about identifying his win conditions right now, which Pokemon he's the most afraid of, and making sure that whatever he does have with him in the back, which is that Salamence with the Intimidate, is able to deal damage and win him this game. The Intimidate, a very great defensive switch from Andrew, weakening both that Mudsdale and that Kartana. Kartana on Andrew's side of the field using Protect as well, so Andrew definitely hoping that Intimidate pays off. Leaf Blade into the Salamence, it hardly deals any damage at all, and close combat into the protecting Kartana from that Mudsdale.
Andrew making a defensive switch and not getting punished for it, different to how Nick got it. He now gets the Salamence in. That puts pressure on Nick's Kartana, and the Kartana sticking around for Andrew is going to put pressure on the Mudsdale as well. So I think a very smart switch. The Intimidate also exceptionally helpful. The Kartana not predicting it, going for a Leaf Blade that does negligible damage due to Salamence. It's fantastic typing, and I think Andrew just holds the cards. He just has to execute it correctly, or Nick has to make some fantastic plays out of nowhere.
Yeah, there is definitely a ton of pressure on both of these trainers right now to think through their turns, think about what their opponent's doing. We do see Nick start off this turn with a very defensive switch, switching out that Kartana for the Tapu Fini, once again getting that Misty Surge, that Misty Terrain out on the field. Leaf Blade from Kartana, though, targeting the Tapu Fini and knocking it out. An amazing prediction by Andrew there, bringing it down to just Nick's Kartana and that Mudsdale getting the second Beast Boost. Salamence using its Flamethrower to target the Mudsdale. It looks like it's going to actually knock it out. So an amazing play by Andrew. Unfortunately, I don't think the Kartana on Nick's side of the field will be strong enough to win him this game.
No, Kartana doesn't have a way to knock both of these Pokemon out, so Andrew will be moving on to the finals of the Dallas Regionals. A fantastic prediction there from Andrew, knowing what the Kartana was up to, knowing it was going to leave the field, knowing of course that the Tapu Fini was the Pokemon remaining. He locks in the Leaf Blade, catches it on the way in, and a really good way to end the game, showing his knowledge of course of the game. The crowd seemed to enjoy that one, so I hope they enjoy the next top four as much, but really well played by
This is Colin. Sam is running Tapu Fini, Kartana, Gigalith, Metagross, Vikavolt, and Arcanine versus Colin's team of Garchomp, Arcanine, Metagross, Tapu Fini, Vikavolt, and Porygon 2.
Tapu Fini, another similarity as well. I think both of them, though, are running the more offensive Tapu Fini that we've seen. It's not been one of those bulkier ones that we saw from a couple of players like Caleb. They're really looking to do damage. So these teams across the board look like they're very fast, very damaging teams. The one thing to note, Colin does have that Trick Room option with his Porygon 2, so that could have influenced how he's trained some of his Pokemon, maybe to thrive under the Trick Room, and it'll be important for Sam to make sure he has that answer. On paper, it doesn't look like he has that many answers, but I'm sure he's got a couple of tricks up his sleeve to make sure he's got this far in the tournament. He would have had to have an answer to Trick Room at least at some point.
Yeah, that Gigalith definitely looks like the most obvious candidate for that Trick Room answer. It is very slow. We know that it gets access to moves like Stone Edge, maybe Rock Slide, maybe Earthquake. We've seen a lot of them carry the Z items for one of those moves, so it's all going to come down to, again, how these trainers decide to play these games, what kind of predictions they make. They're really playing at a very high level right now, so it's all on the line as we get started. Sam sending out his Tapu Fini and his Vikavolt as his lead. Colin responding with the Arcanine and Tapu Fini of his own.
So the Tapu Fini's matching up. They're not going to be able to do too much to each other, but the Tapu Fini on Colin's side of the field put under a lot of pressure by this Vikavolt. In response to that, very smartly, he's bought his Arcanine. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the Vikavolt. And the Tapu Fini putting a lot of pressure on the Arcanine. So a very interesting matchup, the way that they sort of pressure each other across the board. I think the way that they're trained is going to be exceptionally important here. And what they decide to do, I think a couple of switches here may give one player an upper hand. I think they've just got to be very, very smart about how they do it. So a good switch going unpunished is probably the way to get themselves a really quick upper hand.
No switching this turn. Arcanine moving first with a Snarl. It connects with both that Tapu Fini and that Vikavolt, lowering their special attack stat by one stage. Tapu Fini with the Hydro Pump, and it connects with that Arcanine. It does a ton of damage. It gets that one-hit knockout even with the Snarl. So unfortunately for Arcanine, it just wasn't able to hold on, and Vikavolt dodging the muddy water from Colin's Tapu Fini. Really unfortunate turn for Colin there, and Vikavolt using String Shot to target that Tapu Fini. It's going to lower its speed by 2 stages.
Yeah, that's a really good turn, I think, for Sam. Even with the Snarl, he manages to weather the storm and retaliate with a big Hydro Pump. We've not seen any Tapu Finis using Hydro Pump yet, so he's definitely one of the more offensive, and the Snarl probably cancelling out one of those attack boosting items. The special attack once boosted is a real monster to handle, so I think that might be the item choice there that he's used, and that put a lot of pressure. Obviously the Vikavolt showing something we've not seen from any of the Vikavolt on stream in the String Shot. The Tapu Fini now exceptionally slow. Vikavolt may be able to move before it and start getting big damage down. The Metagross coming in isn't really pressured by either Pokemon on Sam's side of the field, but I'm worried about what it's going to be able to do in return. Obviously, Bug Buzz will do good damage. Vikavolt probably looking to do some damage to the Tapu Fini, but I don't think Metagross is the perfect pick here for Colin. So the momentum really coming with Sam, and the onus on Colin to do something quickly.
Tapu Fini switching out on Sam's side of the field. That Kartana sent in immediately to take the Meteor Mash, no attack boost. Buzz from Vikavolt onto the Metagross, again not dealing a lot of damage there. And we see a second Muddy Water from the Tapu Fini on Colin's side of the field. This time it does connect with both Pokemon. It deals a nice chunk of damage and gets the accuracy drop on that Kartana.
So he gets something he needs there. He gets a lot of damage down the field. Very good that the Muddy Water finally hit Vikavolt. Might be in range to get knocked out by something from the Metagross. Maybe the Meteor Mash could do it. Maybe a Zen Headbutt would be likely as well. Metagross, not the most offensive, but coming in and really taking hits.
Leaf Blade from that Kartana will connect with the Tapu Fini, but it survives. It will be able to attack once more, provided either this Vikavolt is knocked out by the Zen Headbutt, which it's not, holding on with that 3 HP, getting the Ayapapa Berry, getting most of its health back. Vikavolt using that Bug Buzz. It does target the Tapu Fini, unfortunately, for that knockout.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, no! Tapu Fini survives! I could have sworn it was out of HP, but it's not. It's able to still use that Muddy Water and bring both the Kartana and the Vikavolt down into the red, certainly in range of a Bullet Punch if that's what Colin has on his Metagross.
Yeah, that's a really good turn for Colin, not getting knocked out. The Bug Buzz, an interesting decision there from from Sam. Could have gone for the Thunderbolt, maybe a little bit scared of a switch or trying to capitalize on another switch there. So the Metagross still in a really good position. Now they've both been lowered by consistent Muddy Waters. He's going to be able to start picking up knockouts with Bullet Punches. He has it, but he doesn't go for it this turn.
Sacred Sword from that Kartana onto the Metagross, who fires off a second set headbutt for the knockout. It's not very effective, but it still does enough damage to knock that Kartana out. Vikavolt with the Thunderbolt to finally knock out that Tapu Fini.
Yeah, that's a nice exchange of Pokemon. I think both players really wanted to take a knockout there. But importantly, that Kartana remove for Sam, that's such an offensive pressure. It wasn't doing much to Metagross. The Sacred Sword, an interesting choice. If it had something like Night Slash, it could have gone for that for some super effective damage, maybe trying to capitalize on a switch, but Colin very confident in Metagross's ability. Both players, though, getting to bring in a new Pokemon. Sam getting something really helpful in the Intimidate. It is only going to affect the Garchomp, though.
Yeah, so Garchomp not looking that great right now. It does have a nice type advantage against that Arcanine, but thanks to that Intimidate and knowing that Arcanine is such a bulky Pokemon, I highly doubt we'll see it get knocked out this turn. Really, Colin needs to protect his Metagross here unless he's confident in whatever. Actually, no, he only has 2 Pokemon left, so really he needs to make sure he protects the Garchomp, protects the Metagross, and is able to sort of move things around so they're more in his favor.
Yeah, he's got a lot of work to do, I think, with the 2 Pokemon on the field, and with Sam with another one in the back, even if he knocks Vikavolt out, he's still on a 2v2 situation, and Metagross has taken a lot of damage. I don't think there's much left for Vikavolt to do, and it is going to get knocked out immediately.
Bullet Punch from the Metagross into the Vikavolt for that knockout. If that Garchomp moves next, we could see it deals massive damage to that Arcanine thanks to its Z move.
It's going to be the big Tectonic Rage coming out of the Garchomp. Don't forget, though, it has been intimidated. There is also the Misty Terrain on the field, but it's not going to affect that because it's a Dragon type, it's ground type move. Tectonic Rage, though, going into the Arcanine, we saw one survive thanks to the Intimidate earlier, so it's going to be able to see how close it comes on this move. It's going to be doing a lot of damage, and it is enough for the knockout, so not the Intimidate just not pulling its weight.
Unfortunately, we do see the Misty Terrain disappear from the battlefield. That was a great play by the Garchomp there. You know, it's possible that's some information for Colin to take moving forward. Maybe that Arcanine isn't as, physically bulky as some of the other Arcanine we've seen throughout the weekend here. And Tapu Fini is the last Pokemon left on Sam's side of the field. Unless it can stop that Metagross, it's not looking that good.
It's not looking good at all for that Tapu Fini. We have sort of concluded that both the Tapu Finis in this game are having to lock themselves into a move. It's also going to have to weather the storm of this Poison Jab. Looks like it does. It's going to be able to retaliate with a Muddy Water, though, asking a lot still from this Tapu Fini.
But it gets the knockout on Metagross, so we know the Garchomp will move first because that is what we saw from this past turn. It will use that Poison Jab, but if it's not enough for the knockout and we see a possible accuracy drop from that Muddy Water, it could mean that Sam is able to win the game. It's not over yet, despite the fact that it looks like on paper this Garchomp should definitely get the win against Tapu Fini. It all comes down to how much damage this Poison Jab is going to do. It connects with the Tapu Fini, but it survives. Tapu Fini misses the Muddy Water, though, and just like that, Colin is able to win game 1 here of this top 4 match.
Tapu Fini really putting up a fight there. Obviously, it needs to hit the Muddy Water, it needs to hit the accuracy drop. That is a very tight win condition to get to. And the Poison Jab from Garchomp, and the few Garchomps we've seen so far, haven't actually been using that Poison Jab much. It's something people picked up this year, and that really swings that matchup in his favor. It was a tough position when Tapu Fini came in on its own. Looks like it's holding a choice item, probably the specs based on the damage it did early in the game with that Hydro Pump. It really struggles there to pick the correct move. You want to be getting damage down on both in a 2v1 situation. You also want to be hitting for super effective damage, but you can't do that with just water and fairy type moves, the staple of Tapu Fini. If you lock into fairy to deal with Garchomp, you haven't dealt with Metagross. If you go with water types, you do get neutral damage on both, but it's just not enough for those knockouts, especially on Garchomp.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough for both these trainers to adjust moving forward into Game 2. That match was just so close. It's really hard to know, how do I make adjustments when it all came down to just whether or not Muddy Water was able to connect with that Garchomp in the end. It's almost like if I were in their shoes, I would think about running the exact same 4 Pokemon and just trust that I'd be able to sort of outmaneuver my opponent, either better or just the same, depending on if you're Sam or Colin. Looking at the fact that Colin was able to lock in his team already in this match, I think that might be what he's planning to do.
Yeah, this has been a very, very fast-paced match. Lots of attacks each turn. A lot of players pushing back and forth on each other, so I really, really enjoyed that from both players, really. A very interesting kind of play. Colin, though, just seemed to have the upper hand. Very smart switch, as I was saying. That Metagross doing work for him. Maybe Sam decides to bring his own Metagross this game.
Tapu Fini and Arcanine coming out from Colin's side of the field. Sam sending out his Tapu Fini and the Kartana. So once again, we see both Tapu Finis out on the field, but unfortunately for Sam, you know, Colin did decide to lead with that Arcanine, getting both a type advantage over that Kartana and intimidating it as well.
That's going to be a really good position for Colin here. We do see, as we said before, the Arcanine puts pressure on the Kartana. The Tapu Fini does put pressure on the Arcanine. Kartana puts pressure on the Tapu Fini. So another one of those weird crisscross situations where all the Pokemon interact with each other. Kartana likely going first, so the Tapu Fini under most pressure. If you can keep it safe and get something done with Arcanine, he's going to be in a good position, but then Arcanine also has to be safe from whatever Tapu Fini has to offer. We saw in the reverse of this, the Snarl trying to stop it, and Hydro Pump just went through it. So if that's an option, it's going to be something that they have to think about, and I think big decisions here are going to be what really decides the tempo of this game.
Kartana switching out, Vikavolt taking the field in its place, so not wanting to stick around, especially with that Intimidate, but Arcanine with the Flare Blitz targeting that Vikavolt. Will it be enough for the knockout? It just barely misses that knockout, leaving it with 26 HP and allowing it to use that Ayapapa Berry to heal almost all of its health right back up. An amazing switch there. Tapu Fini with the Hydro Pump. Unfortunately, it does connect with that Arcanine and it will knock it out, just as we saw in game one. But Tapu Fini on Colin's side of the field, we haven't seen it attack yet. It decides to go for a Moonblast, targeting the Tapu Fini on Sam's side of the field. If it gets a special attack drop here, that could have been huge, but unfortunately we do not see it.
No, that's the problem we see when you put the choice items on these Tapu Finis. You end up locking yourselves into a weird move. Very good play there from Colin to try and Flare Blitz the Kartana. A brave switch from Sam, bringing in that Vikavolt, which was a really big problem here. So that Vikavolt, bulkier than the Kartana, manages to take it. The recoil obviously adds up, and then followed up by a Hydro Pump. That Arcanine removed from the field. So the Vikavolt and the Kartana, which is in the back, a little bit safer now, I think, on that side of the field. Definitely some answers from Colin, though. He can be doing a lot more.
Tapu Fini switching out, Arcanine taking the field in its place, looking to intimidate that Garchomp, possibly stop it from getting a knockout on that Tapu Fini thanks to the poison jab, but Colin making a beautiful read here. It's going to use, again, the Groundium Z, again, that Tectonic Rage, and hopefully target what is now an Arcanine.
Yeah, very smart play. Obviously, he was trying to get rid of the Tapu Fini, but it's a very brave play, knowing likely what's in the back for Sam. It is going to be the Arcanine, that switch being punished, so this Arcanine likely going to be removed from the field immediately, like we saw in game one. It doesn't manage to hold on, and now the Pokemon advantage sits with Colin. I think the momentum, or it's equal now. I think the momentum, though, is definitely in his favor. This Moonblast coming in, going to target down that Vikavolt and fall a little bit short of the knockout.
Vikavolt holding on, able to string shot that Tapu Fini once again, just like we saw in game one, lowering its speed by 2 stages and lowering the speed of the Garchomp as well. This means when Sam brings back his Tapu Fini onto the field, if he decides to send it in, it will most likely be the fastest Pokemon.
Yeah, it's really good string shot. It's a move that hasn't been picked up ever before, I don't think. You get it so early in the game, people just seem to ignore it. Vikavolt now getting the speeds down on both Tapu Fini and Garchomp is brilliant. If the Tapu Fini is outspeeding the Garchomp, it puts pressure on it with Fairy type moves. If Vikavolt outspeeds the Tapu Fini, it puts pressure on it with Thunderbolt. So Tapu Fini is going to be going first.
We don't see any switching from Colin to mitigate that speed drop. Instead, a Hydro Pump into the Tapu Fini. Garchomp with Fire Fang for the knockout on Vikavolt. An amazing play there by Colin, saving that Fire Fang as a surprise for the last couple rounds of this tournament. Moonblast from Tapu Fini on Colin's side of the field into the Tapu Fini on Sam's side of the field, gets that special attack drop, but Tapu Fini holding on with 3 HP.
It's so close. The Kartana is going to come in. It's going to be in a really good position, especially because the Pokemon on Colin's side of the field have had their speed lowered. But these are the last 2 for Sam. He needs them to be doing a lot of work. He needs his Tapu Fini to be doing something, and it's locked into Hydro Pump, so we're doing good damage to Garchomp, not so much to the Tapu Fini, so a lot resting on Kartana's shoulders here to really push on, and if the Pokemon in the back is a good answer, he's in trouble. We're going to see him try and get rid of Tapu Fini though.
Kartana with the Leaf Blade into the Tapu Fini on Colin's side of the field for the knockout. We know that the Tapu Fini on Sam's side of the field is locked into that Hydro Pump, so if it does enough damage to knock out that Garchomp, it could be huge. If Garchomp hangs on though and attacks that Kartana with the Fire Fang, possibly for the knockout, but it is intimidated. It does not deal enough damage. Kartana is now at +1 attack thanks to that Beast Boost. We know the Tapu Fini will be able to get a Hydro Pump off most likely again, but Metagross is the last Pokemon for Colin on the field.
Colin getting caught a little bit short there. Didn't switch out after the string shot, so his speeds are lowered, and the Tapu Fini and Kartana, the fastest things on the field, he's going to have to weather an absolute storm to get through, to really get these knockouts. Of course, missing the knockout on the Kartana, really big. Interesting training, and he's going to have to play a little bit safe, starting with this Protect.
Garchomp protecting Metagross with the Bullet Punch, trying to knock out that Tapu Fini. It is able to do 3 points of damage for that knockout. It's all down to Kartana, who targeted the Garchomp with the Leaf Blade.
Yeah, that speed not bothering, especially when the Metagross has Bullet Punch, and now Kartana under threat. I don't think it's going to be able to take attacks from both. Of course, if it can knock out the Garchomp, it won't get caught by the Fire Fang, but Metagross free to start attacking it itself, so a very good position for Colin. Not entirely over, of course. If there's no damage from the Metagross and the Night Slash can come in, it could swing very quickly towards Sam, but he starts off with a fantastic Leaf Blade and Rough Skin doing some damage to help Colin's cause.
We see the Leaf Blade for the knockout onto the Garchomp, so Kartana gets a second Beast Boost. If Metagross is able to connect with this Meteor Mash and knock it out, Colin will be moving on to the finals of this tournament, and Kartana is knocked out. Colin Heyer will be playing Andrew Novak in the finals of Dallas here. A very well played game by Sam though. It was just so close to the end of these games.